I know I already asked this, but it bears repeating, where do you go after a game like Super Metroid?
A title that was not only a breakout hit, but also went on to become one of the series' best entries and helped create an entirely new game genre, not to mention the fact that it killed off the titular monster that the series was named after. Now, I've seen Fusion played a lot in my life, and dabbled in playing it myself once or twice before making this video, but it was only after understanding the context behind Super Metroid where this all started to sink in just how strange this game must have been for the fans of Super Metroid. For those unaware, after being told by his new development team that Super Metroid was too hard for them, series creator Yoshio Sakamoto went off to create a Metroid game that would appeal to a brand new audience and make it easier for them to get from beginning to end, which is kind of an ironic statement that we'll talk more about later. The result of these tweaks rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way, as they felt that this isn't what they expected after Super Metroid. However, Sakamoto also made the decisive effort to give a bigger emphasis on the story for Fusion, giving what is honestly the most in-depth look into Samus' character in a 2D Metroid game. As a result, I think Metroid Fusion is interesting. By no means is the game bad, but Fusion is such a different beast that I can't help but understand the initial lashback it got. But at the same time, I love the added depth it gave to Samus' character and the focus on the narrative as a whole. But as I say that, I feel that my feelings toward Fusion as a whole are a bit complicated to explain in a simple intro paragraph. So with that being said, why don't we dig a bit deeper and start analyzing this game, as we dive right into Metroid Fusion. Fusion opens up on a mission in progress where Samus is helping escort biological researchers as they gather samples from the wildlife on SR-388, when suddenly the creature from the end of Samus Returns appears and latches itself onto Samus's power suit. At the time, Samus didn't think too much of it, but as she got back onto her ship, the blob takes a hold of her, making her lose consciousness as her ship drifted into an asteroid belt. Thankfully, due to the ship's automatic eject function, Samus was able to escape in a pod, which was picked up by the Biological Space Laboratories, or B.S.L for short, who tried their best to bring her around, surgically removing Samus's power suit to hopefully stop the spread, but by the time they got to her, the blob made its way into her central nervous system, giving her a small chance of survival. Miraculously, they managed to find a cure in a DNA sample they had taken from the baby Metroid, because, as it turns out, the Metroids were the natural predators to the blob, now known as the X parasites, which, upon receiving the baby Metroid's DNA, the X within Samus immediately disintegrates, saving her life. That's twice now that the baby Metroid has come through for Samus, something that she herself makes a mental note of as she leaves in one of the Galactic Federation ships. But just as she gets 5 feet away from the B.S.L, an explosion comes from inside the station, causing the ship's AI to start up, asking Samus on behalf of the Galactic Federation to check it out.
However, not everything is as it seems, at least for Samus, as thanks to her near-death experience with the X, a nameless fear has awoken in her heart as she approaches the station despite her better judgment.
This is where you get full control of Samus being able to explore the B.S.L station at the allowance of the Galactic Federation. Unlike the other Metroid games, you aren't allowed to go wherever you feel like, as the AI will relay orders to you to tell you where you can go and what you should do to progress through the game. This is thanks to Samus' surgery happening in the same day, to which the AI points out she's only operating at 10% of her max capacity, and since the Galactic Federation want to hire her again just in case something happens in the future, they're going to coddle her as much as possible. This coddling ended up being Sakamoto's answer to make Fusion a lot easier for newcomers, as by constantly guiding the player, you run less of a risk of them getting lost and eventually frustrated when they can't find the path forward. Ultimately, it functions just like Chozo statues in Zero Mission, where you're told where to go, but the path forward isn't always clear, requiring that you make 9 left turns just to get to the right side of the screen. The feeling of discovery is still here and running at full effect, especially when you manage to figure out that the map itself is lying to you. However, I will admit that the general pacing of the game feels a bit slower than Zero Mission, and the other 2D Metroid games for that matter. If this were Zero Mission, you'd simply go to a Chozo statue and mark a place on your map, and then you'd have free reign to go to it. But in Fusion, you head to a navigation room, the AI tells you where to go and what to do, maybe it'll talk about how scuffed your chances of survival are, and then it'll let you go. By no means are these moments long, but over the course of the game, they do add up over time, which did make me feel a bit antsy at first after coming hot off the heels of 3 games that allow me to barrel through them at my own pace. Though that's not to say I don't like when the game slows down, as I'm quite fond of these moments where Samus enters into the elevator and the game focuses in on her thoughts as she contemplates the situation. These elevator rides are where Samus gets dangerously close to actually saying something, but more importantly than that, they're very intimate moments that you normally don't get in Metroid games that portray the aspect of Samus I love the most, being that she's human. While you don't exactly get her whole backstory, you get enough cracks in the armor to get a general idea of who Samus is as a person, with something she regularly comes back to is her admiration for her former commanding officer, Adam Malkovich. Heck, she admires him so much that she ends up secretly naming the AI Adam, as its manner of speaking is identical to his. While these elevator rides don't exactly provide the deepest dive into Samus's character, it's moments like this that help soften her and help remind the audience that she's not just a battle-hardened warrior, but human, something that Fusion would later try and run with, but more on that later. Now, as far as Metroid games go, Fusion is more or less the same in terms of gameplay, giving you all the familiar Metroid power-ups with a handful of twists. The first, and probably most jaw-dropping twist, at least for me anyways, was the fusion of missiles, as the design team decided to consolidate regular and super missiles together, giving you an obscene amount of ammo to go through. Fusion also changes the missiles to have a freezing effect to them, as Samus's new biological makeup prevents her from using the ice beam. It's not that much of a big deal, but it's pretty cool that the missiles ended up getting revamped for this game, seeing as, at least in my case, they really fell off when I got the super missiles because why wouldn't I just use the super missiles?
And it's a good thing this change went through because the X ain't playing around, as they use everything in their arsenal to take down Samus.
As you can guess from the intro, the primary enemy type this time around are the X parasites. However, infecting the host's neurosystem is just one of their abilities, as they have another power to copy their physical form and mimic whatever power, memory, and thought pattern they had. Thankfully, Samus's new Metroid DNA not only prevents her from being reinfected, but now she can take the X and use them to her advantage, being able to heal herself and restore her missiles. Don't ask me how that second one works. And yet, despite that, the X still proved to be a big threat, not only because of their ability to copy a creature's physical form, but also their ability to copy their memories as well, exponentially increasing their intelligence.
That last bit is the most impactful part, as thanks to the fact that these single-cell organisms can suddenly sprout a brain whenever they get into close proximity to one, it allows them to come up with more complex and varied schemes that honestly outshine any of the previous enemy factions in the series. There are moments in the game where the AI sends you to run off to some far section of the B.S.L, and suddenly there's an alert for the station saying that it's overheating, which when you get to the control room, you find an X-transformed scientist attempting to sabotage the station. There's another time when the X decide to take advantage of Samus's Metroid DNA and freeze themselves so that now the power that we just discussed helps her fight them gets turned on its head and now she has to avoid them. And there are a handful of instances of the X stealing her upgrades in an attempt to use them against her. There are a lot of different things that benefit from Fusion's focus on storytelling, with the X easily making the top of the list. The X feels so genuine in their attempts to stop Samus that I couldn't help but, for lack of a better term, admire their efforts. In their attempts to freeze themselves, they recklessly charge at Samus, losing their lives yes, but dealing significant damage to her as a result. And they will do this whenever they're on screen, and even when Samus has upgraded her armor to the Varia suit. However, the second you make a screen transition after getting the Varia suit, the Ice X run from Samus all over again. It's so small, but it just adds so much to the X as antagonists, as while not effective, they're trying, and their efforts leave one of the biggest marks on this game's story, while their damage provides one of the biggest marks on Samus's body. So no two ways about it, Fusion is a high damage game. Not to the level of Samus Returns, as your health bar exists after a boss hits you, however, it can be difficult to find a moment to breathe at times. Out of all the Metroid games I played, Fusion is the one that I game overed in the most, with a big part of that reason being a lack of familiarity, as despite playing this game at least 2 times in the past, I never made it to the end of the game, so a lot of things, namely bosses with grabs, took me by surprise.
Still, with that being said, Fusion is a fairly easy game all things considered, and even if you have a couple issues, it's nothing a little learning can't solve. Okay, so you remember Samus's power suit? Well, apparently it had some organic parts in it, and that was enough for the X to infect it and take control of it, having access to all of Samus's powers, and combined with the brain power of a human, it leads itself to be the deadliest creature on the B.S.L. The SA-X is hands down the best part of the game, as it manages to flip the script and the core concept of Samus's character on her head, but unlike Zero Mission, it's like this for the whole game. Samus the Hunter becomes Samus the Hunted, as the SAS constantly stalks her, altering the routes that she can take to trap her, forcing her to take it on whether she wants to or not. While you don't actually fight the SAS a lot, the times you do encounter it, you'll find that the SAS isn't the scariest thing in the world, as its AI is pretty bad, and on top of that, the places you encounter it are pretty small and can be circumvented by exiting the room. However, its damage is no slouch, possibly being the highest damaging thing in the game. It's also pretty cool to see the environmental destruction the SAS causes to the B.S.L. just to get to you. It's pretty unnerving hearing and seeing all the destruction happen around you as you progress through the story, as it made me wonder when it was going to appear, only to then catch me off guard thanks to how few times you encounter it. I also like to think that this is how the Metroids felt when they encountered Samus to an extent, at least the Gamma Metroids from Samus Returns, which allows you to walk a mile in the opponent's shoes and see how intimidating Samus was for them. Now, despite the fact that Metroid Fusion is a Game Boy game, I gotta say, I'm really blown away with its presentation. While Zero Mission wasn't a slouch by any stretch of the imagination, Fusion knocks it out of the park with an astonishing amount of cutscenes and scene-specific artwork that make it stand out against the vast majority of Game Boy games. And something else I wanted to bring mention to is the music of Fusion, as it's pretty stellar. Now, Metroid games up to this point have all had amazing soundtracks. However, I never felt the spark that would make me notice a song during gameplay, as somehow they all fell into the background. Fusion, on the other hand, I couldn't help but notice, in one part being because Fusion is a really loud Game Boy game, like turn your headset down to 10 loud, and the second part being because there are a lot of energetic tracks that go alongside the ominous ambient tracks. I actually couldn't get enough of Fusion's soundtrack while editing the audio to this video. It was all so good that it kind of blows me away that all of this was on the GBA. And then I remember Mega Man Zero is also on the GBA, and things start to make a lot more sense. It's mostly the boss themes that get all the energy, but nevertheless they're pretty cool listens, like Security Robot Box and the Yakuza boss theme? Why is it called that? But with that being said, I'm all out of things to talk about gameplay wise, so what do you say we head back into the story and wrap that up as well? Eventually, after being hunted down in almost every corner of the B.S.L. by the X, Samus would eventually find a hidden room at the bottom of Sector 6, to which, after managing to absorb the wave beam from one of the X, she's able to bypass the lock and get into the room, revealing that the Galactic Federation has been cloning Metroids in secret. But not just baby Metroids, they also have Alphas, Gammas, Zetas, and Omegas as well. As Samus dives further into the place, an alarm sounds off, causing Samus to run back to the entrance, where the SAS is shown to have followed in behind her and tries to eradicate the Metroids. However, the Metroids overpower it, but not before it can deal enough damage to the sector where the B.S.L. activates a detachment protocol, sending the place flying, to which it then blows up. Thanks to some quick movements, Samus manages to escape the sector in the nick of time, to which, after she gets off safely, Samus then gets in contact with the AI to hear what the explanation is for this, to which it very bluntly tells her that she may have to pay a price for letting the clone Metroids die like that. The AI then goes on to explain that the Federation has been working on a Metroid breeding process for peaceful purposes only, saying that they explicitly created Sector 1 to be an exact recreation of SR-388's ecosystem to provide the Metroids with the right environment to reproduce. As a result, getting some expedient results as they were able to transform the Metroid from its larval state into Omega in just a couple of days. But thanks to the XAX having the ability to search out its natural predator, all that research is now up in smoke, to which the AI then tells her that she needs to get moving before the SAX finds her. This confuses Samus so much that she actually decides to speak, asking if there's more than one SAX, to which the AI states that thanks to the X's ability to reproduce asexually, there's no less than 10 SAX running around the B.S.L, and as a result, urges Samus to leave, sending her to the navigation room to tell the Galactic Federation the situation. On the way there, Samus contemplates her conversation with the AI and wonders how Adam would have handled the situation, saying that he would have softened the blow as he wasn't a heartless machine obsessed with duty. But unfortunately, that's the kind of compassion you can't get from a robot. When Samus gets to the navigation room, the AI tells her to leave the rest of the Federation. Samus asks if this is a joke considering how dangerous the X are, to which the AI then states it's because of their incredible potential is why the Federation wants to capture them. The AI then goes on to say that despite the danger, the Federation won't be needing Samus's help for this, knowing that she'd destroy all X given the chance. In fact, the Federation has stopped supporting Samus's venture into the B.S.L. shortly after she landed, as they stopped supporting her with upgrades for her new disposition, forcing Samus to have to make do by absorbing stronger X parasites to get suit upgrades. Heck, at some point the AI stops giving Samus direction unless the X explicitly try to take themselves out with her, forcing Samus to make her own way through the ship, which is how she found out about the secret facility in Sector 6. During the AI's explanation, Samus has an inner monologue saying that the X can copy everything but a being's soul, and without it, they'll be nothing more than instinctual monsters who can only focus on their instincts like grow their numbers and dominate. Samus then breaks out of her train of thought, telling the AI that she'll activate the self-destruct sequence before the Federation get there, destroying the X and herself if need be. Samus then tries to leave, only to find out that the AI locked the doors. Samus then tries to reason with the AI, accidentally calling it Adam in the process. The AI then asks Samus who is Adam, to which she elaborates by saying that he was her former commanding officer and a friend. One who knew that it takes self-sacrifice to save the masses. Adam then calls Adam an idiot for making that decision, telling Samus that if she gives up her life, the galaxy would lose its best chance of survival.
Instead, suggesting that by changing the flight direction of the B.S.L. and activating the self-destruct sequence, she can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone, eliminating the X on the ship and the remaining X on SR-388.
In the process, talking more like Malkovich, asking her if she has any objections, even adding lady at the end just like her former commanding officer.
After getting her marching orders, Samus makes a run down to destroy the X, but just outside the propulsion room, Samus has a run-in with the SAX. However, thanks to the power she's been gaining throughout the adventure, she feels more than confident enough to take it on in a fight, initiating the series' first rival fight. A rival fight is when a boss closely mirrors your player character, forming an ultimate challenge for the player to overcome as you now have to think about how to beat yourself. In a sense.
With the SAX, once again the AI comes in to lessen the fear of taking it on, as it's really easy to take advantage of. But despite that, the game shows a lot of respect to the SAX, as you cannot take this thing on in a head-to-head fight, as its damage output will cook you in seconds. Despite Samus being more powerful now than she was at the beginning of the game, she's only walking around with the remains of the power suit, while the SAX on the other hand has the power suit, so the difference in punishment they can take is unequivocal. Instead of going head-to-head, you need to make use of the room, leaving the SAX to chase you all the while you pelt at it while switching floors as fast as possible. I really like this fight as it manages to play into the uncomfortability the SAX gave off in earlier sections, as you still gotta run from it, but now you tag it at every pass, which still respects the fact that the SAX is stronger than Samus, but also tells of how Samus managed to beat the SAX not by force, but by using her mind, which is cool as it ties back into Samus's monologue from earlier, doubling down on what sets her apart from the X. And partway through the fight, the SAX transforms into this thing. I think what this is supposed to be is sort of a halfway point between the X Parasite and SAX. Like, it's trying to hold on to its power suit form, but the damage dealt to it is preventing it from keeping it together, resulting into this monstrosity, who, as a result, is much easier to deal with, and yet I still lost to it. With that out of the way, Samus goes to claim her... Oh. Word. Regardless, Samus runs into the propulsion room, and while she's at it, sets off the self-destruct sequence, for the first time in her life being the instigator of this, as she darts back to her ship, not only to find that it's missing, but not every Metroid was destroyed in the Sector 6 explosion, as an Omega Metroid comes to confront her. The Omega Metroid has no issue smacking this form of Samus around.
But surprisingly, the SAX comes to confront the Omega Metroid, only to get itself smacked in the process.
In the small in-between where the Omega Metroid defeated the SAX, Samus takes the X for herself, restoring her old power suit back, where she's able to crush the beast with ease. And just before the B.S.L. explodes, her ship arrives to save her in the nick of time. When Samus gets back to her ship, we see her at her most vulnerable state, at least mentally speaking, as she fears what the fall would be like now that she openly went against the Galactic Federation. Thankfully, AI Adam manages to snap her out of it, saying that someone will understand what she did was for the greater good. That statement gets Samus to realize that the AI that she'd been talking to the whole time actually had the mind of Adam Malkovich, as thanks to science, the Federation managed to save his mind, which is why he started talking like Adam when Samus mentioned his death.
I think about this ending a lot, especially with Fusion's emphasis on the human spirit and how it separates Samus from the mindless killing machines like the X. It took me a bit to actually get the, admittedly surface deep message, but at the very least, I think I found a nice way to describe it. What Fusion is trying to say is that humans are a lot more than what they appear to be on the surface. While greed, corruption, and some other third thing can exist in a person's heart, so can empathy, trust, and fellowship. And even when a person seems to be stuck on bad, you can find that by digging in a bit, there's good that's in their hearts, as exemplified by Adam. But even then, the most important thing is to never stop believing in the good living inside of people, and to not let fear cloud that belief no matter what the situation may look like. And just before she forgets, Samus asks how did this ship move on its own since it's supposed to be manually operated, to which Adam says that he got help from her animal friends who she saved earlier in Fusion, ending the game. And that was Metroid Fusion, which, I repeat, is a very interesting game. Looking back at all my emotions toward Fusion, I realized that my love for the game comes from the story and being able to pick apart Samus and the SAX. From the gameplay side of things, I don't actually have all that many fond memories of it. Not saying that it's bad, it just doesn't stand out all that much to me. With that being said, I think Metroid Fusion is good, but your mileage may vary depending on what you play Metroid games for. And since I somehow became a huge fan of the story without realizing it, Fusion for me was an amazing experience, albeit not one that I'd immediately return to anytime soon unlike the other games. Still, I greatly appreciated in how it colored Samus, making her into one of the most interesting 2D protagonists I'd ever followed in my life. And for that reason alone, I think it's worth every Metroid fan's time.